Hi,
Assalamualaikum.
how are you?
Really good to see you here, Mohammed. How's your day been so far, man?
Alhamdulillah, you?
Pretty good. We're all here in Perth, and you're in Auckland, right?
Yeah, in lockdown, so just at home.
How long has it been now?
It'll be 3 weeks on Tuesday, and then we've still got another week at least. So we're in lockdown for a while.
I think we last met in Sydney, which is also in lockdown. It was lovely to actually meet you in person, and I remember you were telling me a little bit about how you're going over to New Zealand to do your masters in applied finance. Is that right?
That's correct. Yeah, so
Fantastic.
I
Tell us.
October last year moved back to New Zealand. I was in Sydney for a year, so started my master's in applied finance, and just got a month left till I finish, inshallah.
Fantastic, fantastic. Well, it's really nice to be here with you, and I just wanted to kind of take the opportunity just to introduce you to all of my friends. I think you're doing some great work with Muslim investing, the page itself. Could you tell us a little bit about how you started the page?
So yeah, while I was in Sydney, I'd graduated with an engineering degree and realized engineering wasn't for me, and found an interest in investing and Islamic finance, and did a lot of research into Islamic investing myself, and couldn't find anything out there that was easy for me to understand. So I started Muslim investing for myself, and then also to provide that knowledge to people my age. So it is a page that helps Muslims to invest in an Islamic way and learn financial literacy.
Fantastic. You've got something very similar to my own self. I actually did engineering for about 6 months, and then I jumped aboard I finished a degree in finance. So that's something common there. And I was hoping to actually start our conversation with a question about because finance, when people hear the word finance, they think of money, right? And I guess um, my first question, and I'm also happy to contribute to this, is what role does money play in your life? I mean, what is it about and even also you said that you were attracted to the study of finance. Was it wanting to know more about how to use money? Is that what motivated you to go towards finance, or was it something else?
So, well, we need money to live in this world. I mean, that's a given. But I've always been interested in learning how to grow my wealth. I think that's
Mm,
been a very coming from a family of businessmen, going to university, doing the typical route of getting a job isn't actually common from my family. So it's always been interesting to me to grow my wealth in a way that's not just through a job.
mm,
So through investing is obviously one way of growing my wealth. So that's why I've always been interested in it. So
mhm.
that's sort of the importance of wealth. I mean, you need wealth, like I said, to live in this world, and then give back to the community. I think that's another thing. So being able to grow my wealth and then give back to the community and help others grow their wealth too. And that's another thing with Muslim investing is teaching others how to grow their wealth. So it's definitely important to learn how to use money and be financially literate. I mean,
Yeah.
what's your
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I one of the things that money, when I think of money, it's kind of like financial strength is kind of like physical strength almost, in the sense that to be able to kind of be functional in society, you do need some to some degree financial strength. And it also reminds me of one of the hadiths of the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, in which he said that a strong believer is more beloved and better in the sight of Allah, even though there's good in both, the weak and the strong one. But this idea of, and even if you look in from a spiritual standpoint into the life of our Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, he had companions who were financially supporting him, right? And so this idea of using money for good things, for with the right intention, I think is a forgotten idea. People think, they tend to associate the idea of money with a lot of things that are antithetical to living a goodly life, and it does have, I think, to me anyways, I mean, this makes sense that it is kind of like an act of worship if you have that sort of an intention that you're using the money that you're going to earn in a halal way. If you use it in a good way, right? In a way in which you have an intention for the divine in the acquisition of your wealth, it's going to benefit you not only in this world but also in the hereafter. So I think that is something that's really motivating for myself, and for that reason, I'm really kind of, I guess, interested in becoming more financially literate, so that I can use money in the way that, in the way that benefits me in the long run. So like, that's something that kind of leads us on to the next point, is about financial literacy, right? So where do you begin? If you want to, I guess, if you want to eat well, you go out and you learn about nutrition. If you want to stop praying, right? Stop praying, you go out and you learn about prayer. When it comes to money, right? And if you want to, if you want to grow your wealth, like you mentioned, where do you start? How do you become more financially literate, and what does that even mean?
Being financially literate is understanding where your money goes and making informed decisions on what to do with your money. I mean, it can be very confusing, especially if you're looking at all the different terms. You've got saving, investing, you've got so many different terms. Um, I would start with tracking your money. So where are
Mm-hmm.
you spending now? Start off with budgets. Um, and once you've done that, and if you have any debts, pay off those debts. Set aside money for an emergency fund. So have money, especially now in times of COVID, where a lot of people are losing their jobs and things like that. So having money on the side in for a rainy day, and then start setting aside money weekly, monthly, whatever it is, but consistently, and put that into investments. And now that term obviously can be quite confusing. Investing is uh, a very big range of different things. So you just start off with researching basic investments. I would use websites like Investopedia and things like that just to look at what a stock is. You have to start somewhere. Like you said, you have you go for like food and things like that, eating, you go and research so that you can be healthy. So you do similar things with investing and money. So you have to start somewhere. I think the key thing is starting, and then it'd be a lot easier then go on from there.
I think you've mentioned something. You've mentioned a lot of things, and I think what I'd like to do here is just to kind of break things down and take it one by one, one step at a time. So, as an individual, obviously, if you're earning money, you've got income, you've got cash flow in, right? Now, when you get that money, you obviously have a certain level of financial. You have to make certain financial decisions, right? And part of your money goes to consuming, right? You consume your bills, food, etc. When you say savings, why is saving important? I think one of the things that I want to kind of I hope you can talk about as well is the idea of inflation. Like
Mm.
people don't realize, even if you so people think like being financially strong means I just keep saving as much as I can. So I minimize my consumption and I just keep on saving as much as I can. Do you think that's the only way you build wealth? Is that how you become financially strong?
hmm You mentioned inflation. So inflation is where your money is devalued. So, for example, um, back in the day, a newspaper would cost 20 cents, and today it costs $1. So over time, money is printed, more money is printed and circulated, and so the value of money goes down. Typically, it's around 2 to 3% each year. So if you were to just save money in a bank, as Muslims, we can't earn interest. So if you were to just save money and not have it grow in any shape or way, then each year that money would be worth less and less.
And
So
that's a great point because just by keeping your money in an account in which you're not quote unquote earning anything, any interest, so as to speak, you're losing out, right? And
yeah,
that's why banks, what they term to be a savings account, actually incurs interest. You earn interest on it, right? You accrue interest over time, which I guess from a Muslim standpoint is problematic because if you put it in there, it becomes, the money becomes prohibited. They can't earn the interest on there. So, too, I guess that's the conundrum here, right?
exactly. I mean, so some countries have an option of Sharia compliant savings accounts. So you
Right.
have, but again, the profit rate with those accounts are so low that they're lower than the 2 to 3% of inflation. So again,
Mhm.
if you're just saving money in those accounts, each year you're still losing money. So what
Mhm.
do? That's when investing comes into place. So you invest. I mean, investing doesn't just mean in stocks. Investing can be in stocks. It can be in cryptocurrency. It can be real estate. It can be in business. Um, investing in yourself, upskilling yourself, and earning more income. That's another way of growing your wealth. But just putting money aside, either leaving it in cash. Muslims have a typical mentality where you leave money in cash or just in a bank account, not doing anything with the money. You're just losing money, essentially. So you're not even just maintaining, you're actually making things worse for yourself by just keeping it in a bank account.
So what before you kind of go on to talking a little bit more about investing, what is the difference? I mean, just for the layman out there, what's the difference between finance and investing? How do you distinguish between these two terms? Because sometimes people will say things like you'll hear words like this, like Islamic financing versus your page, Muslim investing, right? What's the difference between these two things?
So financing would be like when you're borrowing money.
Mm.
Um, um, Usually when you're financing something, so you're borrowing money so that you can finance something. So financing a car loan, for example, you're taking money so that you can pay for that. Investing is the opposite. Investing is where you're putting money and growing it. That's
So when you put money into a saving account in the bank and you accrue interest on it, what's actually happening? How is the bank paying you interest? Are they investing your money?
Yeah. So that's what actually happens. So the bank then takes your money, they invest in other projects, they gain profit on that, and then give you a very, very, very minimal amount back in interest. That's usually what happens. So why not do it yourself?
But there's a big point here. So if I invest, aren't I gonna get interest in return? Like you're basically telling me to kind of do what the bank does like
So
invest money. They're paying me interest.
okay, yeah, I can see how you think that. So the difference is when you're investing your money, you're investing in something you believe that will grow in value. Whereas when you're putting in a bank, you're not actually taking any risk because they typically guarantee you a certain rate. So Islamically, from that point of view, both parties need to be taking some sort of risk. So by investing yourself, you're taking the risk of that company could either grow your money or could lose your money. So you're taking that risk, and you've supposedly done the research to determine whether you think the company or the investment will do well. And so it's not interest that you're receiving, it's a return, profit.
Hmm. Could you give an example of that where we're not receiving interest, but actually a proper return that we've in some way earned?
Mm, like you're investing in an Apple stock and the value of Apple goes up, and then so one stock in Apple, you bought in at $100, and then after 1 year, it's gone up and it's now worth $110. So now you've received $10 of profit because the company as a whole has grown in value.
Right. And when you purchase a stock, essentially what you're doing is you're taking risk in the ownership of the company. So you believe in the operations of the company, that this company is actually going to do something worthwhile, produce something of value in the economy, whether it be from the perspective of producing goods or giving out, performing a type of service that people value. And you believe that this will, because it's going to give out, because it's going to create value for others, it's going to grow over time, and hence you'll be able to take part in the growth of the company and get a return. Right now, I
Exactly.
guess the downside of that, and this is where the risk element comes into investing, is that the value of the stock could go down, so people may not value the good or service that that company is producing over time. In which case, because you're sharing in the risk of being a part owner of the company, you could end up in a loss. Whereas that is definitely not the case when it comes to savings accounts, because sometimes you can earn a fixed rate as well. Banks are usually just doing the investing, and they could be earning a lot of returns on those investments, which they're doing, but they have a fixed sort of a relationship with their customers where they're giving them a fixed
Mhm.
rate in return. It could be variable as well, but I guess it's a different. It's like a third party comes in between you and the idea of investing. So what you're saying is, instead of going to the bank, why don't you just instead of just saving your money and keeping it in these kinds of accounts, why don't you take a portion of your savings and invest it instead? Have I got it right?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So you're removing that middleman, and you're also then Islamically, you need to take on the risk when growing wealth. If there's a guarantee of wealth, a guarantee of a profit or a return, it won't be classed as Islamic. Hence, money just growing for the sake on money is a problem. Whereas growing because a business has performed better is now profit.
Yeah. I remember one of the questions somebody asked was how is investing different from gambling? I think this should pretty much answer that question because obviously this is not a type of gamble. You're actually taking an educated risk about the potential kind of value that a particular company is producing. So that really does make sense. Another thing that I guess I'd like to ask is what distinguishes conventional investing, so just investing in any company you wish, from Muslim investing, right? You use the term Muslim investing. How do you distinguish between?
Okay, so there are a few criteria when it comes to a Sharia compliant investment. We start off with one of the obvious is not investing in companies that are dealing in weapons, alcohol, pork, adult entertainment, things like that. Those would be classed straight away as non-halal. And then you're looking at the ethical side of the company. So is the company causing harm to the planet? That's another criteria to look at. So those are the non-financial criteria. And then financial criteria, you have a few. So you're looking at the revenue of the company. The maximum allowance for a company to have revenue from a haram source, so having revenue from one of the sources I mentioned earlier, is 5%. The scholars have come up with this as an allowance because it's very difficult to find a company that's having no interest whatsoever, but there's an allowance of up to 5%. So as long as the company complies with that, and then you've also then got the debt ratio of the company, so the total debt to the total assets of the company, or the total debt to the total market capitalization, which is the size of the company. That is below 33%. There are a few other criteria, but check out Muslim Investing, and there's a bit more detail on that, or Islamic Finance Guru is another source that you can look at. But so basically, there are non-financial aspects to it, and there's also financial aspects to it. But yes, I know that sounds very complicated, and you may not want to be doing that for every single stock. So there are simpler ways of figuring out what halal stocks are available. So one way is looking at a halal stock screener. So there are a few on the market. There's one called Zoya, another one called Islamically. And what they do is they filter through the stocks and they'll give you essentially a pass or a fail on the Sharia compliancy. So that's a quick and easy way to determine whether a stock is halal or not. But I wouldn't just take it off the face value from one of those stock screeners. They're a good way to get you to then further research into the stocks yourself. I'm always a believer of understanding what you're investing in. So for the same reason, you're understanding whether a company is actually Islamic or actually meets your values. So start off with that.
Yeah, yeah. I guess if we take it back to what we were discussing at the beginning, the building of wealth, right? Investing is, I guess, one way of building wealth. Business, I mean, at the end of the day, if we look at the economy as a whole, right? The economy is basically lots of people, businesses, individuals, organizations creating value through the production of goods or the performance of services. Now, if you think about it from that angle, you could produce a service that, according to sacred law, might be prohibited. For example, setting up a casino, right? Like for a Muslim to do that kind of a business would be, or to build wealth in that way would be prohibited, or to do something that, or to, for example, sell pork, right? So pork, obviously, for Muslims is prohibited to eat. So that as well would be problematic. So I guess what you were as you were talking, what I kind of thought of was investing in a similar way, that in essence, when you invest, you're saying, I'm not going to do the business. I just believe in this person doing the business, or this organization doing the business. If they're doing something of value and they're creating value through halal means, then I'm on board. And then you could actually benefit from that, right? So it's not really about, I guess, it's not that investing or even financing for that matter, like borrowing money, is prohibited. It's just that, if you do it through the right means, the next question would be, well, how do I actually build my wealth? And that, I guess, that's the main crux of the discussion here today, is we're probably, as a community, especially Muslim communities, we're probably not as literate about these things, and as a result, not able to build our wealth and kind of really benefit from these kinds of these kind of things like investing and actually borrowing money through halal means. So, um, as I guess we will kind of try and wrap up, unless people who are attending have more questions. But yes, I'd like to kind of end on this and kind of have a bit of a discussion around this. Is it always bad to, is it always a bad idea to borrow money? And do you need to borrow money to start investing? Or can you, as a person who's just, working full time, actually start investing straight away?
So personally, I would say that borrowing, unless it's a necessity, I wouldn't borrow. I'm
Right.
also mindset where I live in New Zealand where we don't currently have um, any Islamic mortgages, for example. So I wouldn't be okay with borrowing money for a loan. Um, just personally, I would rather just rent. Um, not the most financially best decision, but just because I'm not comfortable with it. But when it comes to like borrowing money to fund organizations, Islamic organizations, and sorry, organizations and things like that, as long as the means of the actual borrowing is halal, I would say that would be okay.
Yeah.
But when it comes to investing, no, you don't need to borrow to invest. You shouldn't be investing if you need to borrow. Um,
Mhm.
First, you need to increase your income or start selling things and things, growing your wealth first before you can invest then. And with platforms nowadays, you have micro investing platforms where you can invest from literally $1. So you don't need thousands or hundreds of thousands of dollars to start investing. So like just start off with $5 a week, $5 a month. Like it's just getting into a habit of putting money aside for your future self. I think that's what's important.
So I guess for a person who's earning, you would probably suggest, you know, put some money aside as saving, but at the same time, and build like a type of a net where a safety net, so as to speak, in case of an emergency. But then also be sure to take out a bit of money and invest that so that you can spend on your future self and protect yourself from an emergency in the future as well. And also build your wealth, right? If you do a business, and I think this is the kind of business you should be doing, i.e. investing your money, right? If you can, I think maybe we can talk at a separate time about what it means to actually run a business and potentially how we can build well through that means. But for now, I guess another thing that you mentioned, I just want to come back to that. You mentioned something about how you'd rather rent than purchase a house, but in certain places in the West, in Australia, for example, we do have access to to financial finance providers that can lend money in a Sharia compliant way. In those instances, what do you think is a good idea? Do you think it's a good idea to actually work towards? Because a lot of people will make this, they'll say something like, I pay 20 to 30% of my income in rent every year. And that's going towards someone else's mortgage, right? So why not get an asset, get a house, acquire a house through halal means, and pay that towards building an asset in the long run? What do you think of that idea?
So, I mean, it depends on like researching the market. Is the current house market inflated? There's a lot of different factors. So, I mean, that's one instance. If the market's inflated, is it a good time to buy right now? So that's one aspect. Another one is just running the numbers and seeing if it actually makes sense for you. So running the numbers means looking at all the different costs that it would take for you to buy a house versus renting. Renting, if something goes wrong in the house, you don't need to pay for that. Whereas if something major goes wrong in the house, factoring that in, you've got your tax rates and things like that on housing. I think once you've figured out all those numbers, and also, do you want to be living in do you want to be living in that house, or do you be tied down to that house over the next 20, 30 years? I personally would like to be moving around if not for COVID, but so it comes down to whether it makes financial sense for you. That's different for every person and what your goals are.
And I guess from one angle, it goes. I guess the question that it kind of prompts me to ask is that a bad investment? So I guess it depends on why you're doing it as well. If you're doing it for investment purposes, then I guess a good question to ask would be, are you better off investing in stocks and other kind of commodities as opposed to investing in land? Or if you're just getting your first home and you just want a place that you can call home, then I guess that's different as well, right? If you want to stay in one place. But but yeah, I think that was that kind of answers the question I had. Did you have any questions for me, or did you want to kind of wrap up now? I think I gained quite a lot from today's conversation. I'm sure there's a lot of things that we can now go back and kind of um, look at
Mm.
in what we can talk about next. I'm
Yeah,
sure we covered a lot of things. So did you want to say anything before we conclude?
yeah. I think you mentioned last time in a previous conversation that you're looking into housing. So what are your thoughts on that? Buying a house and things like that with the option of Islamic mortgage.
Well, I think you covered it pretty well. I think if my own personal thoughts are that if you know that you're going to be staying in a particular place for, 5 to 10 years, or maybe even less, maybe even 3 to 4 years, I think it might not be. And if you've got the deposit, because that's a big thing as well, right? You need 10 to 20% to be able to actually just get an Islamic, like a Sharia compliant loan. Um, if you have those means, I think it might not be a bad idea to actually consider doing that, because then your money isn't going towards paying off somebody else's asset. You could actually build your own asset in that time. That being said, I think there's a lot of other things that come into play if you're somebody that does want to remain mobile and travel a little bit more, and you do have other investments in which you're, and I think, to be honest, Mohammed, I think if somebody really wants to be able to answer that question for themselves, I think they should start A, saving, and B, investing. So when both, and C, also paying the debts off, right?
Hmm.
Debts, any credit cards, anything like that, they need to first of all actually get rid of those things, right? And get rid of the debts. So once they've gotten rid of their debts, the way you build your wealth or your net worth is through building assets, right? It's building assets. And I think this should be the kind of conversation we should be having. Perhaps this could be a conversation we could have next
Hmm.
around how to actually build assets. So an income stream, when you work, you just have one income stream. But if you invest in various companies, you have multiple income streams. If you have multiple businesses, if you're an entrepreneur, you're building income streams, right? So somebody could, if they were given $50,000, for example, let's say that's a 10% deposit for a $500,000 house. If it's a business-minded entrepreneur, somebody who has that entrepreneurial knack and spirit, they might take that $50,000 and do wonders with it, right? They might create lots of things. They might build that money through their knowledge of investing. Versus, let's say, somebody who just goes ahead and buys a house, right? What would you want to do if you were in that position? That's
Yeah,
a good question. But I think it starts. I think the starting point should be, let's start building wealth in whatever way we can. Let's start, eliminating our debts, and get into that creative mindset. I think when you get into that mindset, these answers get answered for you in your individual circumstance. Those are just my own thoughts.
that's true. And as you become more financially literate, you start finding out different opportunities where you can grow your wealth.
Yeah.
I've definitely found that whilst learning about investing, coming across different opportunities, different things which I never even knew existed. It's something that you might be interested in, and you can grow your wealth through that. So,
Yeah.
being,
And I was saying that something else came to my mind as well. It's almost like networking, right? As you meet new people, as you kind of come across new opportunities. And I think as you start doing it, you will find opportunities that will of growing your wealth that you may not have ever thought of if you were just not
exactly,
really doing
exactly.
it. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for your time. I always enjoy you. It's always a pleasure. Um, I'm looking forward to seeing a lot of great work. I think Muslim Investing is doing some fantastic work. There's a lot of other resources as well. There's Islamic Finance Guru. There's EFTA, Institute of Islamic Finance. There's lots of other good work that's happening now that we encourage everybody to check out. And hopefully, Mohammed, we'll keep in touch. And thank you so much for your time. I do appreciate it.
You too, man.
All right, then, inshallah. Look after yourself.
You too. Bye.